Okay, I'm John the Engineer Turmel, TajProfessor, Great Canadian Gambler, and I'm going to tell you about my standard normal crystal bell ball, how I predict the future with this machine. Now, back in 1979, I was in the Ottawa Citizen as the teaching assistant of Canada's Mathematics and Gambling course, and I was asked to explain the odds of the games at the exhibition in the midways. And so I did an analysis. I found out that they were operating with like 28% disadvantage, and another game had 37% disadvantage. So I told the guy that I can predict how long my money should last, plus or minus so long. And yes, my $20 that they gave me lasted for 24, it should have lasted 24 rounds, and it lasted for 32. So I was lucky. Okay, I should have gone broke in 24, but I actually went broke in 32. So how do I know that? Well, I use what's called the standard normal bell curve. This is the most powerful tool there is for predicting the future and for knowing what's going to happen. Okay? And also what happened in the past. What it allows you to do is take any average from a sample and fit this bell curve to it to tell you 2/3 of the time the range that are going. If do the example again, 2/3 of those results will land between the first standard deviation and here. Where is it there? And then 95% will land between here and there, the second standard deviation. And 99.7% will land between the third standard deviation. So a typical example, you're playing craps in a casino or you're flipping coins. Now, if you're flipping coins, you expect the bell curve to be about the mean of 50-50. You're going to flip it 100 times. You expect 50-50. So what are the odds of 51-49 or 49-51 or 48-52, 52-48? That can be figured out. So the question is, how big is the bell around the 50 average? Well, there's the equation for it. It's a square root of the number in the sample times the 50% probability times the 50% chance of missing. P times Q. That's a standard, simple square root. Now, so the example is, now you got 100 plays, and P is 50%, Q is 50%, that's a half. So a half times a half is a quarter. So you got 100 plays divided by 425. Square root of that is 5. So, one standard deviation, 2/3 of all results, will land between 45 and 55. 95% of the time, all those results will land between 40-60. And 99.7% of the time, it'll be between 35-65. And 99.997%, it'll be between 30 and 70. So that only one time in 33,000 will you exceed a fourth standard deviation on either side. Got that? 4 standard deviations, 33,000 to 1 against exceeding it. For any normal random sample. This applies to everything. You can take any sample, the height of the kids in the class. You can take the age of the kids in a certain area. You can take the weight of the kids in a certain area. And then if you take another sample out of there, you'll get pretty close to the same answers. So this tells you how close you expect to be. So this is the most powerful analytical tool there is. Now, let me give you an example now. This equation, when you're playing in a casino, if you're playing blackjack, well, it's 50.5% for the house, and it's 49.5% for the basic player. 1% difference. If you're playing craps, it's 50.7 and 49.3. It's 1.4% difference. Now, if you're playing roulette, 52.5 versus 47.5, 5% difference. If you're playing a hard number at the craps, play 100 of those. Well, now you're and of course, if you're betting on the 11s, well, now you're down 16 plus or minus 5. So the chances of being up around 0 are more than 3 standard deviations to 1 if you're playing 100 11s at the crap table. So, now, that is because all casino games have pretty well the same PQ factor. 50-50, 0.5 times 0.5 is 0.25, and 60-40, 0.4 times 0.6 is 0.24. Almost no difference. So every casino game has the same standard deviation equation, which is square root of n over 4. That's it. All casino games. Now you have higher percentage rates where these numbers vary a little more, but still, it's always between 25% and down close to 1. All right. Now, next step. Let's say you're dealing with very small percentages, like 1% and 99%. Well, guess what? What's 99% of 1? Pretty close to 1. So when you got high percentages like 99, you can just drop them out. That Q becomes a 1, and you're left with the swing about the average is the square root of the mean. So NP, n times the sample times your probability of hitting, gives you your average. And the square root of that is how much of the swing. Anytime you have small percentages. I'll use that later on in the COVID example. So now, let's go to the my example in my career. How I figure out my odds. Now, all my career, I have had a standard deviation playing poker in an hour, expecting around 35 to 40 hands in an hour. I have always had a swing of 22 bets. I mean, I stick my scores into my spreadsheet and it calculates my standard deviation as I go. And over the years, it's always been about 22. So, I know that if I'm going to play a game for 16 hours, I take the square root of 16, which is 4, and I multiply it by 22 to get 88. And I know that whatever my result is, should have been, I expect to be 88 plus or minus around that. And that's why, if I happen to be down low, I count how many 88s away I am from there. Wow, 2 standard deviations. That's 44 to 1 shot against. Oh, wow, that's a rare night. Now, here's my best and my worst long shots. Now, Daniel Negreanu, famous Canadian poker player, I think got his start in my Toronto Underground game, said that he had his biggest loss and his biggest win back-to-back. And so did I. About 10, 15 years ago. My whole career at the Taj Mahal, I used to earn on average 3.5 $10 bets an hour. And actually it was closer to 50, but they're taking $10 in a session fee, and I'm tipping about $5, to the dealers and the food and stuff, so that I'm left with 35 an hour, 3.5 bet win rate, plus or minus 22. Now, when I went to Brantford, they had a new rule. They take $1 out of every pot for what's called a jackpot, when somebody's 4 of a kind get beaten by someone else's 4 of a kind. Wow! Then they have a big division of the jackpot. The winner takes half. The second guy takes, the loser takes half, and the winner takes a quarter, and the rest of the table get a chunk. Well, in the years and years and years they've taken $3 an hour off me, I never won a share of a jackpot back. So my win rate at Brantford was 3.2 bets an hour, not 3.5. Plus or minus the same 22. Now, about 10, 15 years ago, I wrote it in my journal, I was playing, and over a 16, now I expect to win in 16 hours times my $35, $500 and some dollars, okay? Instead, I lose 5,030, 503 bets instead of winning 50 bets. Wow! 550 bet swing divided by 88 came to 6.34 standard deviations. Now, I worked that out. It's 10 billion to 1 against. Me, with my average and my standard deviation, losing 6.234 standard deviations. Boy, now I split it up into 3 sessions. Like I dropped 2 G's, went home, came back, dropped 2 G's, went home, came back, dropped another G, went home, came back. Boom! Next 11 hours I win. No, that was 5,080. Next 11 hours I win 5,030 bets in only 11 hours. And so I now do the square root of 11 times my 22, gives me a 70-something standard deviation, and I was supposed to win, 50, and I only won, I ended up with 4,700, I think, and so I ended up winning back that streak 6.4 standard deviations. Whoa, that's 13 billion to 1 against. So I had a 10 billion to 1 losing streak over 16 hours, and I had a 13 billion to 1 winning streak over 11 hours, back to back. Whoa! That is 130 billion to 1 to do that again. So you can understand how knowing this stuff can show you some freaky stuff. I've experienced wild odds. But still, 33,000 to 1 I consider a danger flag. So, that basically is the simple formula. Now, let's go into this is the formula you would put into your Excel spreadsheet if you want to know the odds, the percentage of you hitting. And all you got to do is 1 over that to get the odds against. So that's it. You just got to stick in 6.4 and 6.35 and you come up with 10 billion and 13 billion. And to do them back to back, that's multiply them together. 130 billion to 1. And that's the equation for it. Now, let's go to some examples. So I gave you the wildest example in my gambling career, but most of the times I would come out after a losing session. I'd say, gee, I expected to win so much, I lost that much, and divided by the square root of the number of hours times 22, and that's the size of the swing. Whoa, I swung 2.5. Whoa, that's almost 100 to 1. Oh boy, what a bad streak. Lucky to know it's only going to happen once in 100. So it's rather reassuring when you take a huge beating to work it out and realize that, whoa, that's not going to happen for another 2,000 years. Okay, so now on to the examples I wanted to use. Now, the best one, I think, is the COVID-19 one, which I'm using in my federal court action to prove that Bill Gates' Oxford Recovery Program killed their patients to discredit the HCQ. Now, here are the numbers. Didier Raoult in France, 4,000 sample. Probability of death, 32 in 4,000, 0.08%, under 1%. And of course, the chances of living are 99.2. So the 99.2 of 0.08%, still about 0.08%. So that 0.8% times 4,000 is 32 dead people. So the square root of 32 is 5.5. So you'd expect that 32 plus or minus 5.5 for the first standard deviation. You'd have 32 up to 43 and down to 21 for the second standard deviation. And the third deviation is 16.5. And the fourth standard deviation is a swing of 22. So you could be from 32 to 54, or you could be from 22 down to 10. So 10 is as rare as 54 if you draw another 4,000 sample. Similarly, the percentages, 0.8 has 3 standard deviations of 1.4. And the other way around, it's 0.2. So it's just as, no, it's 4 standard deviations, 33,001. So the chances of Didier Raoult scoring 0.2% deaths instead of 0.8, or scoring 1.4% deaths instead of 0.8 are 33,000 to 1. 4 standard deviations off. So, to lose 54, 54 is 33,000 to 1. Now, let's take a look at the recovery test in Britain at Oxford, funded by Gates, and they tested HCQ over there. Now remember, it's 33,000 to 1 using the France protocol dosages to have 1.4% die. Okay? They got 0.8, but to get as bad as 1.4%, well, that's 33,000 to 1 against. So what was the score of the Oxford result compared to the 0.8 of France? 25.7! Wow, 33,000 to 1 against the France formula, losing 54. And these guys' formula lost 257. Whoa, out of 1,000. Isn't that incredible? So how do you lose 32 times more patients than France? How do you do that? Well, here was the France protocol regime. They gave 200 grams a day times 5 days, 1 gram total. At Oxford, they gave 2.4 grams in the first day, 0.8 every day thereafter for 9 days. 9.6 grams. almost 10 times as much as France. And they got 32 times as many deaths. Now, if they'd put 20 times as much, maybe they've got 50% deaths. If they'd put 3 times as much, maybe they could have killed them all. So, they proved that France couldn't have saved 99.2 and only lost 0.8%, when they lost 25.7%. What kind of a stupid argument is that? So, all it does is prove that they committed a genocide on their patients by overdosing them. And it's easily proven statistically, because if they'd used the France protocol, they wouldn't have lost more than 50 poor people, 33,000 to 1 against. So, wow, isn't that neat? You can bet your life that they overdose people to death in the Oxford Gates protocol compared to the France guy. But they're arguing that, don't forget, with the HCQ, they also had that 90,000 sample metadata of all the tests around the world that found that HCQ causes deaths. And it was completely faked. Wow, a global effort. And the Lancet and the New England Journal of Medicine printed it, and it stopped all the HCQ trials around the world. Whoa, on a lie about a successful remedy for COVID to amplify the fear. So in my statement of claim, I point out that they exaggerated the numbers by a factor of 100 by comparing the COVID apple to the flu orange. And now I'm also pointing out this exaggeration here. They hid the usefulness of HCQ with a fraudulent, denigrating Lancet New England Journal of Medicine publication and this phony Oxford study paid for by Bill Gates that was murder on his patients. Now, last but not least, we're going to do an example from the election. Now, here are the numbers. I say that the vote count, the balloting, let's face it, they all thought they were cheating Orange Hitler. So every Dem postie and every Dem poll worker had a reason to help cheat Orange Hitler. Okay? But independent of that, that had nowhere near as big an effect, I think, as the social media and mainstream media suppressing the Hunter Biden laptop story, where we found out, the big guy was getting 10% cut of Hunter Biden's China bribe. Whoa! So, mainstream media suppressed that story. Okay? And 45% of Democrats didn't know about it. Which means that 55% of them did and voted for the crook anyway. That's Democrats. Or they hated Trump that much, and that could be so. They thought he said Nazis are fine people. A lie by omission. It wasn't true. So the Dems have plenty of reason to hate the guy, and I think there's that kind of cheating. But here are the numbers. Now, 45% of the people didn't know that Big Joe had a cut of the China money. And out of those 45%, 9% of them said if they'd known, they wouldn't have voted for him. Now, that was a sample of 1,750 Democrats, which meant that there were 9.5% of them times 45% of them, which is 4.2% of them would not have voted for Joe Biden if they'd known. Now, if you do the standard deviation around that, it means that it's 0.5. So it can be 3.7 to 4.7, it can be 3.2 to 5.2, or it can be 2.7 to 5.7. That's the range. So it's 700 to 1 against him getting only a 2.7% boost. Now, that's more than the under 1% in the swing states. So the boost given by the mainstream media by suppressing the big guy gets the China money story was worth 4.2%, plus or minus 1.5, so that one time in 700, it was only worth 2.7, and they only ever needed 1. So, that's it. Now, there's another one too. There's the sexual assault story, and 1/3 of Dems didn't know about that. And another percentage of them wouldn't have voted for him, and that came to 3.2%. So, you're talking about almost 7% of the people who wouldn't have voted for him in those swing states if they'd known the truth. Now, I wonder how they feel when they find out that they got scammed into voting for Crooked Joe. I hope they get upset, but that's a lot of people. But still, it shows that that small percentage there, 4.2%, was certainly plenty to push him up over the 1% he needed to crack Trump, right? So that's how you can tell that it's very rare. It's what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 standard deviations off, Joe winning that legitimately. So that is what you can tell by doing an analysis of the numbers. They gave you the total sample size, and they gave you the percent. And all you had to do was square root of NPQ. And do NP to get the average, square root of NPQ to get the standard deviation, and now you know what it is. How much it cost Trump, that suppression, and how much it cost if he was really good or if it was really bad. Okay? But either way, even if it didn't cost him much, it still cost him 2.7%, which was way more than the 1% edge in those swing states. So, that is what I call the crystal ball of the great Canadian gambler, the TajProfessor. That bell curve I put on everything, and you can do it too. If you got P, well, you can figure Q, what's left. And if you got N, you can do the square root. And it becomes as easy as that to be able to fit a bell curve to any average out of any sample to tell you what to expect next time.